Welcome inside another episode of Point to the Passer. We've got a lot to cover, so we're going to get right to it, including discussions around how much money has been spent on this year's roster, breaking down UNC's strong front court presence as well as its backcourt questions, some takeaways from summer camp games and practices, a look at Carolina's official non-con schedule, and finally, some news around Bubba Cunningham's future role with Carolina Athletics. If that's not enough, I don't know what to tell you. The 60-minute timer starts right now. Joking, of course, we enjoy this a bit too much to put an actual time limit on it. And how could we when we actually have a special guest tonight joining us to make sense of everything I just listed? It is Locked On Heels host Isaac Schade. Welcome, Isaac, to the show for the first time.
Thanks, guys. So glad to join. Been looking forward to this. It's awesome. Thanks for the great work you do on PTTP.
We appreciate the support. It's always nice to see fellow podcasters, and we've had a couple on. We've had Zell on from 94 Feet of UNC. It's just nice to chat with all, the whole network. So you do a daily show. I struggle with Jonathan to even get a weekly out with two of us. How do you do Carolina's only daily show? And I just learned you do an additional podcast now daily that is more general college basketball. So just let's start there, kind of give the people a little bit of background on that.
For sure. So I host two daily podcasts. Thankfully, Locked On College Basketball. I have a co-host. His name's Andy Patton. He hosts Locked On Zags, our Gonzaga show, does a great job. So we kind of divide up the week to where we do two shows together a week. And like this week, I have one of the other three. He has two, and then next week we'll flip. So I either have 8 or 9 total shows a week between Tar Heels and college basketball. And then I have another full-time job and a wife and 2 kids. And so, and that's the thing I've refused to sacrifice is it's like the second it becomes bigger than my family, then something's got to change. And so I'm a night owl, thankfully. And so I do a ton of my stuff like later at night. I'm a systems guy, so I'm always thinking of topics. I've got spreadsheets for days of what I'm going to be doing and getting to, and that's just kind of made it work. I think as things continue to grow and evolve and it get crazier, I think there might come a time when I've got to make some tough decisions occupationally. But for now, it's still working, so we'll see. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, that's fantastic. We obviously, the pod world does stay busy and especially in such a quick news cycle, something happens in the transfer portal, you got to get it out the next day,
Right.
So obviously that can throw a wrench into things. But like I mentioned at the top of the show, we've got a lot to get into. And Jay, I know you've got a lot of thoughts on the roster expenses. The number for this year's team coming in around 14 million, one of the highest nationally. The landscape of college basketball is changing a lot recently. And that is because of NIL, it's because of the House settlement. So I just want to start there in terms of the roster construction. And Jay, get your thoughts on that number. First of all, 14 million, and just in general, your take at this year's team so far. And then Isaac, same to you.
Yeah, I think for me, Craig, I mean, the thing that has stood out to me the most is how much traction that number has gotten nationally and really with local media too. It's made the radio circuit in Raleigh-Durham. It's made the radio circuit across the state. And then you have the national guys like the Goodmans and others who have made a big deal about the money as it relates to, did you A, get enough in the portal, and B, did you get good value for the amount of money that you spent? And I think the other piece is these numbers aren't always public or typically not, right? And this is really the first time I think, and Isaac, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but first time I feel like we got a pretty concrete number from UNC. And that seems also very intentional that this was given to Inside Carolina, Greg Barnes reporting that number. And it really seems like part of it is, look, we're going to give Hubert Davis all of the resources that he can need to be successful in this, what feels like a make it or break it type of year coming up for him. So there's that context. But I think from the national perspective, the part that I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on, Isaac, is the value part, because I think not only is Carolina's roster flying a bit under the national radar in terms of the pieces they put together, but I think overall they got pretty good value. And there's going to be times where if you have the money, you got to spend it. And we saw that last year, right? Where that was the thing last year was, well, why didn't you spend the money? You knew you needed a center. You didn't get a center. And then you go into the season, it just really wrecked the roster construction. This year, they do exactly what they needed to do. They go in, Vasar really, tampering, getting him to go into the portal the way that they did and being able to pull him out of the portal. That was huge. That's exactly the type of strategy that we needed to see and that was different with Jim Tanner this last year. And so that to me is a real positive. And I think you get really good value in Vasar as one of the centers that is potentially one of the best centers in the portal. And then you talk about some of the other guys that they added. Pieces like Jonathan Powell from West Virginia, we've talked a good amount about, but somebody who they probably, if you think about stocks, like they got in on the ground floor on this guy as somebody after his freshman year at West Virginia. So I think there's some good value they got. I think it's fair to say in some cases they probably did overpay out of necessity, especially at the point guard position when you think about the fact that they had to pivot. That this was not their original plan to get Kyan Evans and bring him in, but they did a really good job, in my opinion, of working through their board, identifying their next person, and then being able to close the deal. And so to me, that's the most important thing, not the overall number. And then look at the pieces. Do they attach to the big names, the splash additions? Because I think that's really what the narrative is going to be with this team, where I think the fit is really good. And these guys also seem to match the identity and the personality of Hubert Davis and that 23-24 team that was so successful for him. So curious about your thoughts there too, Isaac, because it's been something that's gotten a lot of play here over the summer since the portal really closed.
I agree with you almost identically verbatim to what you said, Jay. Like, to me, it's kind of unfortunate the number got out there because now it's always going to be a thing, regardless of like, if you do well, it's like, well, of course you better do well. You paid 14 million. And if you don't do well, it's like, you paid 14 million and I
Right.
went and paid 14 million and all I got is this lousy t-shirt, right? Like so I don't like that part of it, but I'm with you. Like, ultimately, I don't care what the number is. I just care that you got what you wanted and needed. I equate the analogy I've come up with to think about it is like an auction draft in fantasy football. Have y'all ever done an auction draft for fantasy? So, like, the first time I ever did it was when Adrian Peterson was coming off like this huge year, and I really wanted him. And this other guy dropped like 72 bucks out of his 200 for that. And I was like, dang it. I didn't want to go that high, but ultimately, I would rather spend money and get the guys I want than be sitting there paying 30 bucks for a kicker because I got all this money left over at the end of the draft. And to your point, Jay, like, it feels like that's where Carolina was last year, almost a refusal to spend money. Like, wake up and get with 2024 and now 2025. That's what you got to do. If you want to get, like, we all love Carolina and we think the name Carolina should still matter just because of the prestige. And I think it does to some level, but not at the level that it did where Dean Smith could just go plop down and say, "Hi, I'm Dean Smith, flash some hardware," and off we go, right? I think you've just got to realize, whether you like it or not, Coach Davis, you've got to be willing to drop a bag. And I think now with Jim Tanner in, as you said, Jonathan, like, now they're doing some of that. And so, yeah, I think ultimately for me, it's that same kind of thing. Is I don't care what the price tag is. I care that they went out and got the right guys. I think the roster construction is wildly better than last year. And to your point about flying under the national radar, the phrase I've taken to saying this summer is, just because he doesn't have the name doesn't mean he doesn't have game. And whether that's Jonathan Powell or Kyan Evans or whomever it is, maybe flying under the radar a little bit, it's like, I don't need it to be the five best individual players in the portal last year. I need it to be the guys that fit the 5 roles to 8 roles Carolina needs them to fit. And if that's who they got, and if that's who Luka Bogovac turns out to be when he eventually gets to Chapel Hill, then I don't care if it was 2 million or 83 million. We got the team we need. And if that's that, cool.
100%. And here's the other thing, like they also do have names. So that's the part that
It's
baffles me
befuddling.
about some of the
Yes.
conversation is there's so much focus on the portal, and I get it because it's the frenetic, chaotic season during March Madness and afterwards, and it's a lot of fun, but it's also just it's so fast paced. There's so many things happening. It's easy to forget that Caleb Wilson is also on this roster as somebody who is a top 10 recruit and looks the part of a bona fide, potentially top 10 or at least lottery pick prospect in next year's draft. And so there are guys with names. I think the nation is going to learn that pretty quickly, especially with Caleb Wilson. We'll get into the scrimmages and get into some of the
Yeah, yeah.
both the camp but also practice and things you've been hearing. But he is somebody that he just looks like an NBA guy. He looks like somebody who's a one and done. And he looks like he's a star and somebody that maybe people have been a little under the radar on him as well, even though he's clearly been somebody who's been well covered. He seems to be emerging at the right time. So I push back on that part too, that there's Caleb Wilson, he's the headliner, and then you've got guys like Vasar and others. And then Tremble coming back, who's going to be an important piece. So I am pretty excited about the roster overall. There are certainly questions. There's a
Yes,
lot of
yes.
questions, not just within the individual pieces, but like you said, how do these pieces fit together? Because it is going to have to be a sum of the parts, very
Yeah.
much like it was 2 years ago. We talked about that a lot.
Yeah.
And so there do seem to be similarities there. This summer is going to be really important going into the fall in terms of how these guys come together, getting Luca integrated into the team as well, and
Critical.
kind of see where things go from there. But I guess if we go through the roster, unless are there other things, Craig, you wanted to touch on in terms of just that overview piece and some of the narratives that are going around?
Yeah, I was just going to echo. I mean, I agree with what Isaac said, and you too, Jonathan, just about the number not mattering as much as long as you find a good mesh of all these players, even if they're not top names or names that you're even familiar with. I mean, how many Carolina fans or casuals are familiar with Luca and his game before he, signed on internationally? And so it's just a matter of getting the right pieces. And I think the biggest thing for me is that it feels like the upside is really high for a lot of players, where you saw what Roy did with that kind of talent, where it took the season to develop. I think there'll be some really strong performances from individual players early on. Uh, it might be Luca one game, it might be Vasar the next. But by time, the hope is, and it's always the hope, that you get to January, February, and that everything clicks. And it doesn't click like it has for Hubert teams sometimes in late February or early February. It's starting to click as you go into ACC play. And I think that, to me, the potential for growth with this team can get to that point by ACC play. So that's what I'm hoping for. And yeah, generally speaking, it's a 180 from last year's team. You have the size, and it's not even a 180 from the guards. You had guard depth last year, and you have it this year. There's just not an RJ Davis leading that guard spot. That's obviously the key difference.
It is, and I mean, something else that we haven't talked about yet is the fact that, like you said, Craig, these are high upside, high ceiling picks in terms of guys that are coming in that they've started to scratch the surface. Like you've definitely seen some production, but their ceiling, they haven't reached that at the college level yet. And all of these guys, I think, are multi-year guys. You're not bringing in guys who are just here. Maybe Luca, we'll see in terms of eligibility, how many years he's going to be able to get from the NCAA. But the other guys you're talking about, Vasar, Stevenson, go down the list. These guys are juniors. Powell's a sophomore. So you have the potential, unless they leave early, certainly folks could transfer or go pro, but there's the potential there for guys to be in the system multiple years, and that's huge. I think about Evan Miyakawa, who's awesome with advanced analytics. He did a study a couple years ago trying to get a sense of like our teams that have older, more experienced, specifically the transfers, right? But older, more experienced players, are they better positioned to win throughout the year, but also in March? And what he found was that continuity was actually more important. That was the most important thing. Certainly, talent trumps everything. Whether you have like obviously like a Cooper Flag for Duke last year, uh, or you have somebody like an RJ Davis who's in their fifth year, talent is the most important thing, but continuity is right there along with experience. So that to me is something that's exciting, not just for this year, but also for potentially the next year, because you have a core of these guys who could stay together going into the following season.
Yeah, I think those are all great points. And if you pay them, they won't have a reason to leave.
That's
And
right.
so
And
that's
the
what we haven't
two,
done.
yeah, and the two non-Wilson freshmen are multi-year guys as well.
Right.
But the concern then is this year's continuity, because you ain't got much of it, right?
That's
And
it.
so
Yep.
I goes back to echo what we've already said about Craig, what you were just saying about how quickly can these guys become a unit. Can they do it faster than what they did last year? And I don't, I'm going to hesitate getting to the non-con conversation of it because I know we want to get to that later. But obviously, these two conversations dovetail very closely together. And so the question that I think we're going to have to watch a lot is you both talked about ceiling and potential. How many of these guys can reach that? And I think whatever the answer ends up being to that ceiling potential answer will probably determine the success of the 25-26 season.
Totally agree. Isaac, who are you most excited for that is new to this roster? I was gonna say just the roster in general, but we don't really have many people returning. You got Seth being a key part of it, but who have you seen transfer or incoming freshmen? Obviously focusing on Caleb there. Who you're thrilled about?
Sure. Well, let's leave Caleb aside because I feel like he's a category unto himself in this conversation. From the both scrimmages, honestly, I think Jonathan Powell is going to be more of a factor than I think I and a majority of people thought he was. I was already excited about his potential production off the bench. I think that both Kyan Evans and Luca are going to be good 3-point shooters. Um, and I think Seth will return to pre-injury form from last year and sophomore year. There's a clear demarcation line of his shooting production pre and post injury last year, and I don't think many people are looking at that.
It's not
But
spoken about in the media very often.
right, like it's just like, oh,
Even by
Seth
fans.
Trimble can't
Yep.
do it. I'm like, no, no, no.
Right.
38.5% pre-injury last year.
Right.
Like
Right. Right.
there's something to that. Anyway, but Jonathan Powell, whether his role being either starter or off the bench, some of that depending on when Luka gets in and how much he acclimates to the team versus Jaren Stevenson. I think there's some conversations there, but whether off the bench or a starter, Jonathan Powell is going to have a role on this team. One of the things I noticed from that scrimmage, and this will just be something about him, and I know we might talk more scrimmage stuff at a big picture level, but he had a quick spurt of 8 points the other day, two threes, and a layup in between them. All three of which were when Cam Johnson was guarding him. New Denver Nugget Cam Johnson,
Right.
by the way. So much for him being teammates with Drake Powell.
Right.
But then also at the end of the game, Jonathan, as the alum freshman team was about to win, Jonathan Powell stopped back-to-back buckets from those guys. It was Cam, and I think the other was JP Tokoto. And it's just like seeing him step up like that, have some chutzpah already doing stuff. Like so I think my answer is more of a like maybe X factor under the radar kind of answer to that because I think truly it's Luca. I'm super excited to see him. I think he could be like dynamic for this team. But I think Jonathan Powell, there's something there, man, and I'm excited about it.
I like it. When we were on 94 Feet of UNC a couple weeks back with Zell, he was asking a similar question, and I said Jonathan Powell. Granted, part of me said I liked him because he chose UNC on my birthday, which is April 1st, and so I got to kind of go with him. But I like his game in general from what I've seen, so hearing you say that makes me even more excited. Jay,
Oh man, so Roy Williams retired on your birthday, Craig.
he did.
Ugh,
Brutal. Yeah.
brutal.
Yeah.
Brutal.
So if everybody else thought they had it bad and hearing that news, I had it worse. I promise. Yeah.
And I think you've had some pretty rough April Fool's jokes on your birthday over the years, but
Oh,
that
yeah.
was one that we
Oh, yeah.
wished was a joke, right? That's
Totally.
still surreal that he picked that specific
Unreal.
day.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
also Joel Berry's birthday. So you have your
That's
birthday
right. I
buddy.
do
How
have my
about that?
birthday.
You and
twin. I
JB
know.
too.
I know. I know. Got to get him on. Got to get him on.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Isaac, in terms of Powell. I think the floor is doing what he did at West Virginia, which was he was a 3-point specialist. He was somebody that after Tucker DeVries gets hurt, he was able to come in and start for the better part of the year.
That's right.
And be really efficient from 3-point range, 35%, which is really good for a freshman. 65, I think, makes, which was led the Big 12 as well. And so you're talking about somebody that is already coming in, known for being a 3-point specialist. But what they liked about Powell that stood out to the staff was also going back to high school film, sounded like he had much more to his game, right? He's
Yes.
somebody, and you see this in the scrimmage where he's really smooth. If you close out too quickly on him and you get out of position, he's going right by guys and getting to the rim. I'm not going to give him the Cam Johnson comparison because I don't think that's fair, and obviously they're different sizes. But
Sure.
in terms of the smoothness you could see when they were on the court together on opposing teams that, yeah, there's something about just how easy that shot is for both of those guys and how consistent they are. And they're able to take really difficult and long range shots as well. So yeah, I'm
Oh
really excited
man,
about
yes.
him too.
Yeah, those were deep. Both of those twos, or both of those threes, excuse me, were deep. Like one was on the eastern tip of the North Carolina state outline for crying out loud. It was great. And yeah, great point about the smooth factor, Jay. Like he's got, and if Carolina goes some jumbo lineups, he could slide down to the two. I mean, just
Right?
there, which is a whole other conversation about lineup flexibility and versatility this
Yeah.
year. But yeah, there's a lot there.
There is. So I'm excited about him. I mean, I completely agree with Luca. We haven't seen him yet, but watching his tape, he's just gonna be so much fun to watch. And I love the pace that he plays with. He's not an elite athlete, but he's got a little bit more bounce than you think. There's one highlight of him where he goes off a cut and just dunks on somebody, which I did not expect to see from him just based on the scouting report on him. But somebody who's going to play with the ball in his hands. And I think for me, something else I was looking at and really interested in was how this dynamic of the backcourt is going to fit together, how Seth and Kyan are going to play off of each other and get used to playing with each other too, because Seth is a very specific type of offensive player. Like he's best at, and he's really in some ways kind of single dimensional in terms of like I'm in attack mode. And if I'm in attack mode, I can get to the rim. And frankly, I'm not sure. There certainly weren't folks in the scrimmages on the alumni teams, and there haven't been a lot of people in the country that can stop him from getting to the rim and getting downhill.
Would you
I'm
want to? Would you want to get in front of that?
no, well, his brother didn't even want to do it. I mean, he was just going to work on JP, and I get JP's got some years on him now, but I mean that was I don't know how that Thanksgiving dinner is going to go when those guys are matching up like that, and he's just working them. So I think that I'm curious about because there's so many questions right about the playmaking for this team and where is the facilitating going to come from? How is this going to work in terms of just the ball movement and flow of the offense? So I think that's a question for me, but you can't question the fact that Seth is going to be a huge factor on this team. I know he's a bit polarizing for UNC fans even, but he's going to play 30 plus minutes a game. This is a guy who's going to be leadership wise, but also just out there on the floor, the leader of this team in so many ways, and somebody that offensively he can be on some nights he's going to be the first option. We've seen that. He had 27 against Dayton in that comeback in Maui. Obviously, Memphis Seth is the Seth that we want to see all season. So he's capable of having big offensive nights, but he's also somebody that clearly defensively as well, he's going to bring a lot to the table as the primary perimeter defender. Uh, but going back to that piece I was getting at, I think with Kyan, how do they fit together, and then how does Luca fit together, and do they have really a primary ball handler, or do they kind of trade off turns, which I think could work pretty well. So those are questions that we'll see. But I'm curious, Isaac, about like for Kyan, because I know there's a lot of questions about Kyan. He probably is the most talked about in terms of for Carolina fans wondering about what this is going to look like for him transferring up to a degree from the Mountain West
No.
and how he fits in. What are some things that you both saw from the scrimmages from him, but also were hearing from practices from folks like Coach Robinson or others that you talked to?
Yeah, I'll start there. Coach Rob and I talked specifically. By the way, Coach Bill Robinson, I should give context for those who might not know him, is the head coach at Milligan University in Johnson City, Tennessee. It's an NAIA school, but Coach Rob has been one of the like main guys at Carolina basketball camp for the past 2 decades. Just wrote a book about it. It's really great. Right here, Carolina Basketball School, great stuff. But he and I were just talking about on Locked On Tar Heels last week how one of the things he thinks about Kyan is that even though Kyan hasn't necessarily been like a primary distributor as his role, he sees in him the game and the capability to be able to do that if that's what the staff asks him to do. And they had specific conversations about that. He and Kyan did at camp last week. And so I think there's probably more there than we saw at Colorado State. But also, I think it was Coach Rob maybe that even said, we're used to the past couple of years where it's Elliott just being the head of that snake, scoring, or excuse me, assisting about 6 times a game or whatever. Craig, I think it was you earlier that was talking about like how, or maybe it was Jonathan, forgive me, I can't remember. But on any given night, you could have all sorts of different leading scorers.
Hmm.
And what's intriguing to me is that could also be true about assists. And how much more difficult is that type of team to play against and prepare for if not only could we have five, six different leading scorers, but three, four, five guys that might average 3 assists a night. Because Caleb Wilson could do that, a little point forwardy action. Henry Vasar can pass it around a little bit. Luca obviously can play with the ball in his hands. And so if you've got guys that can distribute from all five positions or maybe four positions on the floor, even if Kyan isn't doing a ton of stuff. If I mean, because last year, looking back at Colorado State stuff last year, 3.1 assists, 1.9 turnovers. So, kind of a 3-to-2 assist to turnover ratio. If that could even get slightly marginally better, but you've got other guys jumping in on that too, then I think that takes pressure off him and critically Seth, who I want Seth to have the ball in his hands some, but I don't want him to have to do that a ton because, to your point, Jonathan, about the type of offensive player he is, I think that takes him out of being the special, unique athlete he is when he has to focus on running the offense too.
I think I'm most excited about the distribution of scoring because if you look at games last year, you mentioned your spreadsheets guy, so am I. So like diving straight into the analytics last year, I've done this for the last 2 seasons of the pod just to try to find trends, whether it's
Love it.
late ACC play, whatever, home games, etc. And what I noticed is when those bench points started getting up in the 20 plus range was when we were winning games under Hubert. And like when you got that bench scoring, it was just so essential. And whether that's a Hubert thing that's really important to his teams, maybe so. We'll see. But I think just in general, you have to have people who are going to step up. I've used this phrase over the years. It was always RJ in the heels. It can't be one pick anyone on this team. It can't be so and so in the heels. You need everybody to step up. So I'm excited again to see the upside of some of these individuals. And hey, you get a few of them clicking all in one night, suddenly you're dropping 100 on somebody, and that's pretty basketball.
Well, I think the other thing with Kyan too, which is reflective, it feels like this team overall is the mentality. This is very much Hubert likes to say it's about we, not me. And Kyan is somebody that he's very much a we versus me type of guy. And like you were saying, Isaac, to what Coach Rob had talked with him about, that he's going to do whatever it takes to win. And that's not just something that he's said. You look at his track record going all the way back to high school when he was at Staley High in Kansas City. And he took them to the semifinals his junior year for the first time ever. And then they win the state title his senior year. He's Mr. Basketball in the state of Missouri. And then he goes on and wins Peach Jam as well with MoKan Elite. So this guy has won everywhere, including when he became more of a focal point in their offense last year at Colorado State. They take off and go on this really long period of winning that gets them into the tournament. So I think there's, again, it goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning where maybe he's not the biggest name, right? Maybe he's not the flashiest name, and his game isn't always going to be flashy, even though he's going to hit some long threes that are going to wow us. But he is somebody that's going to do the little things, do the necessary things, do the things that are maybe not the flashy things, but just need to happen to make winning plays. And so I'm excited about that. And he, to me, is going to be one of the leaders of the team with that mentality and how he is really contagious in that spirit of how he's playing, how he's focusing, and being an extension of what Hubert Davis wants these guys to do on the floor.
Is there anything else that stood out to you guys from the summer camp games or practices? There was one clip where Jonathan sent me and I saw Caleb Wilson just flying through the air for a dunk. And I said, okay, I'm ready for basketball to start. But is there anybody else or just general vibes that you picked up on or things that we should highlight?
Yeah, gosh, can we have Cam Johnson back? I think
Yeah, that's great. Eligibility, sure.
Gosh, yeah.
It's. I mean, obviously, we have to make the caveat that in these moments, we can't start trying to take away big overarching takeaways, but there are things we can see, right? Like, I, all due respect to our brother, you mentioned Lenzel earlier, who he told me his bold prediction is that Jaden Young is going to start at the 2. No, I'll do respect,
Yeah.
Lenzel, buddy. That ain't happening. Just I think Jaden Young is kind of the backcourt version of what we've had the past couple years with
Mm.
like James Okonkwo. Kind of like I think it's kind of like that role in the
Mhm.
backcourt because you're going to see the I think the other backcourt guys get the critical bulk of the time from Kyan to Seth to Luca, Jonathan Powell, both freshmen. I think all six of those guys get minutes ahead of Jaden Young.
Yeah.
And so I just and watching the tape, I think kind of confirms that for me. I do, watching it, I really hate that Vin Allen left.
Yeah.
I that is one area I'm where my biggest pause is from a roster construction standpoint right now is Henry Vasar's backup. Is that Jaron Stevenson? Is it James Brown? What happens there? Because if Van Allen Lubin was there and he's your backup five, I feel phenomenal
Mhm.
about this roster. Now, if he's back, maybe Luca doesn't commit. Now, so that I think
Sure.
getting Luca in was more important than hanging on to Ven. So I will take that trade off. But that's one area that just watching the makeup of it, I'm like, when Vasar's not on the floor, who 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 is getting the bulk of the backup 5 minutes?
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's a great question.
And of course you don't want to overreact to the scrimmages too much, and we do, and we're going to, and I'm going to
I
now,
fully
but
expect the Caleb Wilson dunk full court just like that every single game,
Oh,
starting with
100%. I
I
Winston-Salem.
mean,
mean
to be fair, Zayden High basically olayed and let him go, and Vasar just happened to be in the way. Yeah.
Exactly.
yeah, but that's probably actually a good business decision for a lot of these guys, to be honest. And I think the thing with Wilson especially is like Jaron Stevenson, for example, was a solid defender, post defender, both on fours and fives in the SEC. I mean, you look at some of his tape, you go back to guys like whether it's Janai Broom or others, where he does a really good job of walling up in the post and has provided pretty good resistance. And Caleb just steps through and dunks right by him. I mean, he's doing stuff that it's just different. Uh, Yes, it's a scrimmage, but you see it's just at a different level. Just like you were saying, Isaac, with watching Cam Johnson and wishing he was coming back. And it's clear, okay, this is the NBA guy who is that next level NBA guy who's out there. Caleb Wilson was that second guy where he's just consistently in some, it's the flashy plays, it's the big dunks, but it's also making the right play, whether it's making the right pass, whether it's making just the tough, gritty plays where he's going to get some hustle rebounds. He's just going to fill up. He's going to score more points than I thought. Like that's going to be one
Yes.
of the things that I did not expect because we kept hearing he's best when he's not the guy on offense, and I think that may be true to an extent, but in a way, if he's the second or third option in the offense, he's still going to be the guy. He's still going to find ways to impact scoring. But I do, after watching him just with these flashes in the scrimmages, I'm ready to just run the offense through him and Luca. I think you have to start him. He's got to play. I play him 45 minutes, even though there's only 40 minutes in a game. I mean, he's young. He can run. It's fine.
Yeah.
But he's going to be somebody that you want out there as much as possible, and you can be flexible with where he plays. I think they can experiment a little bit with him at the three, and if they need more facilitation, he's awesome in transition, leading the break. He's a really good passer. So there's just so much there. But back to what you were saying about the backup five, Isaac. I'm with you. I mean, I think Zayden High seemed like maybe he steps into that role just from he performs pretty well in these summer scrimmages. We saw it last year.
No, no.
He brings a lot of physicality. He with that physicality, he does foul a lot, and he does turn the ball over a lot. And so I think he's probably still maybe limited just by being inexperienced. And it's good that he can give you some minutes, but ultimately, I've thought all along that Jaron Stevenson probably is going to be the backup five. I don't know that that's ideal, but I do think, again, he was pretty serviceable in the SEC, and I prefer him there than at the three. So those were things that kind of starting to look at with the scrimmages, but it was hard to miss Caleb Wilson for sure, and it was good to see also Derek Dixon going back to the backcourt, somebody who we knew was a high IQ guy coming in from Gatorade player in DC. He played at Gonzaga. I think that was where Nate Britt actually played high school as well. So you got the Carolina ties there. Yeah, Right. Is he going to switch hands? Hopefully not. Let's stick to one
And
hand.
dear goodness, don't bring any brothers along that can
No,
beat us.
no. And we need to know about these brothers in
Please.
advance because we didn't know there was a Chris Jenkins out there until
Yeah.
it was too late. So,
We'll bleep that
um,
word out.
yeah, please. Yeah, that is definitely a curse word in Carolina basketball. So he's another guy that I think Dixon is going to get minutes. To me, he's probably the backup point guard, or at least somebody in a backup guard role. He's going to see some significant time. So it's going to be interesting to see it all play out. And I guess we can start transitioning into the schedule because this year there seems to be more time for these guys to figure it out versus last year, especially where Craig and I were at Allen Fieldhouse for that game at Kansas. There was no waiting. There was go time right away. As soon as the season tipped off, you had Elon, but then out to Lawrence, out to Allen Fieldhouse, and you're playing in the toughest, one of the toughest atmospheres in all of college basketball. So I'm curious, Isaac, what were your impressions about the non-conference schedule? How do you feel it shapes up for this team, and how does it both benefit but maybe limit the team too in terms of journeying through the full season?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, for those who might not have been tracking with all this, with the ACC bumping back down to 18 games, now there will be 13 non-con games, and then adding another one next year with the move up to 32 regular season games. So that's crazy. It's funny, guys. When I first started looking at it, I was like, man, this is a serious overreaction, overcorrection to things. But then the more I've thought about it and looked at it in its totality, I think it's actually kind of perfect for what this team needs to figure out who they are. But then also, it's like there are five high majors they play in the regular season, six if you include the exhibition at BYU, which I think is a great, like, hey, let's play a top five team on the road in an exhibition game. I like that decision very much so. But like you've got Kansas, Kentucky, and Michigan State. That's three of the four teams from the Champions Classic, right? And the only reason you don't have a fourth is because you play them twice in the ACC. And so it's like that is high level. And then you add to that Ohio State and Georgetown, which are two kind of nice mid-tier high major teams. And then you put St. Bonaventure right behind them as an up-and-coming A10 team. And I think because of the gauntlet that we saw last year and the gauntlet we sometimes see Carolina playing, I think this is a Goldilocks adjustment, I'll call it, of like it's not an over or under correction. I've now begun to think it's just right, right? Is kind of where I'm at on it. You do have all the bye games, but it's a lot at home, a lot of opportunity to find that team and who's going to contribute and play critical roles, which hopefully helps get you going maybe sooner than that January, February thing we're looking at. You think about the 22 team and how they just went on that heater. Maybe you can find that group or similar to last year when it was like finally they found that front court with Jay Witt and Vin Allen. And it was like, man, maybe this schedule allows you to do that a little bit sooner. Also, I like that, with seeing that Georgetown is going to be played the weekend when the ACC early game usually is, leads me to believe that we will not get an early ACC game this year. And I think that's part of drawing back to the 18 games because it was in the year, the 1920 season, when they went to 20 games was when they added that in. So I think I kind of like that too, that it's all non-con and then you just got that one chunk of 18 later on. So I frankly, personally love the non-con schedule.
Craig, what are your initial thoughts about it?
I mean, your thoughts on moving that ACC game from December after it got added? I can't love that more. That was always my
Talk
least
about it.
favorite thing. Like the whole point of college basketball, especially at that time, is to develop your team to get to ACC play. And just because the schedule forced it, let's throw it in early December. Never made sense. Always felt a little unfair, and just didn't really, in terms of the playing field, didn't ever really level out or reflect a team's true talent. And sometimes it made a difference at the end of the year too. And so that's not great.
That game at Virginia Tech 2 years ago, right? Coming off a PK 80, the four overtime game at Alabama or against Alabama on a
Brutal.
Sunday night,
Right.
straight to Bloomington, didn't even come home. That was a Wednesday night game or Tuesday. I can't remember when that was in Big Ten ACC. And then come home. And then Sunday, you got to go to Blacksburg without Mondo and
Right.
lose to the Hokies, right?
Yeah.
That game should not have happened. And so that's a
Right,
great
right.
point, Craig.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that up because I think that's really important. And then obviously, playing the blue bloods like Kansas and Kentucky, the chance to go to Kentucky, I know there's not that many opportunities for true road games. I mean, this isn't anything new, honestly. You might get one with the ACC SEC challenge or the big challenge back in the day, and you might get one with the ACC game that's now nixed. So you're gonna have one true road game in this non-con, but it's at Kentucky, and that's obviously enormous. So I'm hoping that Jay will say yes when time comes because it's around his birthday that we need to go to Rupp if we went to Allen Fieldhouse last year.
That's right.
Just throwing it out there, make sure Isaac keeps the pressure on too. We could all go. So I'm thrilled for
Do it.
that game. And then
Do it.
obviously having Kansas come to Chapel Hill is just it's
Massive.
just special. That home and home, give that to me all day long because our experience out there at Allen Fieldhouse was awesome. It was more so, not to deep dive into it, but like the bond that these two schools have,
Yes.
even though there's a dislike, is really cool, and I'm excited to host some Jayhawks here
Yeah.
too. So
Mhm.
those stand out. And Jay, I guess I'll get your thoughts on the big ones, and then if there's anything else on the non-con you want to point out.
Well, the Kansas one is where I want to start because that, again, is the second game of the season. You get Central Arkansas to start things off, and then you have Kansas, which I've joked is a trap game before Radford, I think after that. So my brother, Isaac, Brian, who he comes on with us a good amount, he actually played baseball at Radford for a year and then
Nice.
transferred to UNC. So we
Highlanders? Is that their?
Highlanders, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So
let's
we've got
go.
our UNC Radford consultant, that we bring in for those games. But the Kansas game is the one that, for the reasons you said, Craig, but also for the importance for this season,
Mm.
it is hugely important. We know the narrative around Hubert Davis is going to ramp up to uncomfortable degrees if they lose that game, because then you're really waiting until that Thanksgiving matchup with Michigan State to have the next what you
Mm.
would expect to be a quad one matchup.
Yeah.
And Kansas missed on some guys in the portal. They still have potential to be really good. They're still coached by Bill Self. I still think this is going to be a quad one game. They should be in the top 30 for the good part of the season. But you have to win that game. You have to
Mhm.
take some of the pressure off. But you just don't get that many opportunities, and you got to hold serve at home as well. And so that's hugely important because then the next three big games that you're talking about are either neutral with Michigan State and Ohio State, and then the game at Kentucky.
Yeah.
So you got to win it at home. It's the first time that Kansas has come to Carolina too. You got to do it for that reason. And we haven't beaten Kansas for like 20 plus years at this point. So it's time. I mean, Roy Williams was the coach of Kansas the last time
Yeah, I think
that
it
we
was like
beat
10.
Kansas. Yeah, it was a long time ago. It was Matt Doherty's last year. Raymond Felton and Sean Mann, those guys were freshmen.
Gosh.
Um,
I
so
like that you said, and those guys.
yeah, yeah. I mean, they were freshmen at that point. We won't even name one of the guys. We can name a few others if you
That's what
want.
I'm
Yeah,
talking
no, no.
about.
Know exactly what you're talking about. So to me, that's why that game is so important because then you can continue to build and continue to figure it out with that next set of bye games coming up. And then Michigan State's another very winnable game. They're still a team that I think they're going to take a step back. They were really good this last year. And Jace Richardson, that was such a fun story. Having Jason Richardson's son on the team and then just being a one and done like he was. So you lose somebody like that. I think they still clearly have talent. It's going to be a good matchup. It's a big game again, but I think Carolina should be favored in the Kansas game, in the Michigan State game, and really all these games except for probably Kentucky. So it does set up pretty well. I guess my other piece would be, you know, they've got to at least win two of these games against that big four. And then in addition to that, you got to take care of business. And with the way that the net sets up and the way that the quad system works, you got to really crush some of these smaller teams. They can't mess around like they have at times in previous years. So there needs to be, yes, you can figure it out, but you got to find that gear and be able to close out some of these games and put these guys away and win by what you're expected to win by, which in some cases is going to be 20 to 30 points.
And in the net era, that's why you make a schedule like this.
Right.
It's to get those efficiency margin numbers and just crush teams. So, Jonathan, that's so true, man. They've got to not just win these games, but win them in style, step on some throats and do it, right?
Hmm.
And so that's intriguing. Dude, I love your point about if you don't beat Kansas, you're sitting there twiddling your thumbs till Thanksgiving a little bit and you get a little stir crazy. So I love that observation on it. With Kansas, it's kind of funny because they've got another of the, you know, a dude that has jumped AJ DeBanza at some people's recruiting rankings, and Darren Peterson, who's going to be very legit. Flory Badunga ended up coming back out of the portal, Seth Trimble style. That guy Paul Mbia that
Mhm.
decommitted from NC State, he goes there. Cole Rosario, a freshman, I think will come off the bench, but just reclassed and moved into Kansas for this year. So, man, that's going to be a tough matchup. There's still not like Kansas. I still don't think they're back to that yet, but it's going to be tough. And Craig, one thing I'll just say to your point about the away games, I wish the Georgetown series started on the road because
Hmm.
Carolina has two home and homes going right now. The back end of the Kansas one, which is at home, and the
Hmm.
front end of the Georgetown one.
Right.
I love having two home and homes going at the same time. I just wish they were like not overlapped. What am I looking for?
Just
Like
switched. Yeah, like you
just
had
Yeah.
one
switched
away.
where
Yeah,
one's at home and one's on the road.
totally.
And then that way you'd have BYU in a true road environment, again in an exhibition,
Hmm.
Rupp, and going up to DC, which going back to Jay talking about Dixon, that'll be cool for him to get back up there. But that's one thing I wish is that was one. There's enough games in Chapel Hill. I just wish they had flip-flopped the order of the home and home on that.
Yeah, I
Well,
could get with
also
that.
for the fact that if that game was a road game, you go back to the quad system, Georgetown's on the rise, I think, right? With Ed
Ooh.
Cooley,
Yep. Yep.
he's done this before. He knows what he's doing.
Yes.
He did it at Providence, whether it was not divine providence that he stayed at Providence. That's a whole other story for Providence fans.
That's
Um,
right.
but this is should be a team that's probably top 100, maybe even
That's a
top 75. They bring
that's a
back
good point.
Malik Mack for a second year. He probably should be a little bit more comfortable now that he's been at Georgetown for 2 years, coming from Harvard the year before. And then you have a Arizona matchup of transfers between Vasar and KJ Lewis coming over from Arizona to
Yeah.
Georgetown,
Yeah. Yeah.
and Langston Love from Baylor. So you got
If
some
he can
like
be healthy, yeah.
right. If he can be healthy, you've got some guys that I think are intriguing enough that at home, that's a game that Carolina I think should win, not cruise necessarily, but win comfortably. But on the road, it would give you, like you're saying, Isaac, to alternate those games just gives you a little bit more oomph to the non-conference schedule. I think it just a
Yep.
little bit. I'd like to take it up a notch. I was kind of hoping they instead of East Tennessee State, they would schedule
Yes.
one more high
Yes.
major team,
Yes.
Hmm.
Thank you.
and you can
Yep.
do it at a
Yeah.
neutral, so you can again top 50 at a neutral is a quad one games. You just have a little bit more of a cushion there. So I was kind of hoping for that, but so two things like we've all said, this schedule sets up really well. This is a schedule that you should handle well. No more than two losses, I would say, would put you in a really good situation going into the conference season. But then the other part of it is there's not that much room for error.
No.
That's the flip side
Hmm.
of it. So
Hmm.
you've chosen a schedule that puts you in a good position. Again, whether it's paying the money for players, getting the roster you need, having the schedule you need, everything sets up for Hubert Davis, but there's no room for error. You can't fall short in the non-conference because it's just the pressure is going to ramp up to
Yeah.
levels we haven't even seen yet. The narratives around this team,
Hmm.
it's going to be tough. And then how many opportunities they're going to have in the ACC? It should be better, but
Um,
how much better? We're not really sure.
man,
That's
and from a quad standpoint, like I was just looking at Torvik's preseason projections. And right now, Georgetown, oh, I just lost it. Come back to me. Georgetown is 71st. And
mm,
so if that
yeah.
game was at Georgetown, that's quad one.
Right.
But since
Right.
that, it obviously they're going to move around, whatever. But given that ranking, and top 75 at home though is a quad two game. So that's the difference in quad one and quad two. That would be great. So Jonathan, Greg, let me ask you this question. You just said, this sets up to be 11 and 2, 12 or 1. What record do the Heels have to have going into ACC play for you to feel like they've done what they need to do in non-con play?
Two losses would be ideal. I mean, less than two, obviously. But for me, it's most important to get early on to like you got to get 2 out of the 3 between Kentucky, Kansas, and Michigan State. I don't want to see this team drop in 2 because of the narrative. There's the narrative that exists from quad one games going into the tournament last year, and that despite the media not talking about it every day like they did in March, it's still going to be there because it's still in the locker room. There's still pressure on Hubert. You know your coach. It's still him on the hot seat. We're not in the locker room every day, but that is pressure that builds up even if it's not spoken about. And so these are kids trying to manage that and then putting pressure on themselves because they're definitely all aware of the situation. So yeah, get those games early. But I two would be two would be great. I think 3 is acceptable. No more than 3, especially depending on what team that third one might be. If
Yeah,
it's
yeah, that's critical.
unexpected.
Who are
Yeah.
they? Yeah. And to your point about going 2-1 against Kansas, Michigan State, and Kentucky, that means you got to go 2-0 against Kansas and Michigan State because you don't want to head to Rupp needing
No.
that win to go
Right.
2-1 in those 3 games.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a great point.
Yeah, I can already see the Goodmans and the Rossins of the world warming up the hot take generators if that happens. And so that's the pressure part. It's going to be there. But I think this team does seem to want that stage. That's something that was said about Kyan Evans, and they're going to have to embrace it. But it is going to be a reality that they need to start off well. I would say the same thing where 2 losses at a minimum, but I think to make a statement, to really just push some of these narratives to the side, just the 1 loss, and that would be at Kentucky.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think going undefeated in the non-conference is a little bit unrealistic, just because, yeah, it's easier, but these are still good teams that you're playing, especially the high major teams. But the Kentucky game is the one that's a winnable game. It's not out of the realm of possibility. It's going to be a good matchup. I just do think that Kentucky is really good, and you're on the road. That is a lot to ask. But I've also thought about the fact that Caleb Wilson has marked that game on his calendar. If you know the story of his recruitment, you know that there was a lot of flirtation with Kentucky. There was a lot of thought from Kentucky fans that he was going to be a Wildcat and be part of Big Blue Nation and not a Tar Heel. And so they have circled that on the calendar too. That's going to be a sideline, not as much as Cal coming back to Kentucky, but it is going to be a storyline when Caleb Wilson takes the floor there. And to me, I think he's somebody who he relishes that, and he's going to have a huge game. So there's a possibility there where it's not the exact same scenario as when freshman Hansborough and Bobby Fraser and David Noel went into Kentucky in, what was that, '05, December, around that time. But it feels a little bit like that, where we're not going to be expected to win. And can we pull off an upset and really build momentum for the rest of the season?
Ooh, but if you go if Carolina goes into that game, what would it be? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If they're 7-0 headed into that game, gosh, that could be a top 10 matchup.
It should be. You're right.
Mhm.
You're right. So they're not going to be. It's not going to be like '05, '06,
Yeah.
where they were off the radar because they were so young, coming off the championship team and losing all those guys to the pros. But yeah, a potential top 10 matchup, and that's what you want. I think that's something that was missing last year. Was we played all these top 10 teams, but by the time we got to some of them, we were already pretty bruised up. And so, yeah, that's the hope: is you start strong, you get the Kansas game, you knock out Michigan State, you go into Kentucky undefeated, and then you're playing with house money. And so if you lose that game, okay, you move on, you take care of business the rest of the way. But if you win it, that could really set the stage for something special.
I think, yeah, I think you guys are right. 12-1 is a statement. 13-0. I mean, people get picked off, right? It's been a minute since Carolina went undefeated in non-con play. I happened to just look this up yesterday. And either of you remember the last time the Tar Heels went undefeated in non-con?
When was it?
Was it
It was
09?
it would have been a long time ago. So it was, I know they definitely did in the '07, '08 year.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was that next year, '08, '09, where they rolled and then they lost to BC. I remember that. I remember being really upset because they were undefeated, and then BC comes in, and I'll never forget just Jared Dudley amongst others. And I had a lot of words that we don't say on here because we have friends with young kids who listen to our show. But yeah, Jared Dudley and I were not friends during that game. So I think it was '08, '09. Was that the last time?
That's absolutely correct. Yeah, because they lost that game and then had one more. I can't remember who it was, and then lost at Wake. So they had that undefeated start and then went 0-2 to start ACC play.
Just brutal.
I feel
Yeah.
like a Maryland Terrapin tripped him up in there somewhere, probably.
Good grief.
But yeah, that's a long time ago.
Mhm.
Yeah, so it's not something that happens very often. Even we when we take the Carolina blue glasses off, because the optimist in me wants to say, look, the roster we just talked about, Luka's not even here yet. We're seeing some of the highlights come in. This can happen. And again, if it does, I think it sets the stage for potentially a special season because you use that momentum to build into ACC play from there.
Jonathan, you're right, by the way. Let me interject back. A road loss at Cole Fieldhouse, like in overtime to Maryland, was the only other regular season loss.
Dang Terps.
Dang Terps.
Do we want them back? Do we not? I always go back
I
and
want him
forth. I'm like, I
back.
love the
I
old
I want him
school.
back.
kick those stupid
Bring
Boston
him in.
College Eagles.
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh.
It was, yeah, they made for some fun games, especially Maryland Duke games too.
Oh yeah.
Now we're kicking it old school. So
Curious to see what they are now with the new coach.
yeah, yeah, big changes happening everywhere. So yeah, that's about it for us on the non-con for sure. And I just kind of want to wrap up the show with some news that came out earlier today. We're recording on Tuesday, July 1st. And this is about Bubba Cunningham, transitioning into a slightly different role. So he's going to remain in the AD role at Carolina through the academic year and then transition to a new kind of senior advisor position starting the year after. They're bringing in Steve Newmark is his name, president of RFK Racing, actually a Chapel Hill native, I believe, as well. And he's been appointed as executive associate AD, and that starts in August. So a lot of big terminology there, but the big thing here is that Bubba is sticking around. It's going to look a little bit different, but this is kind of a important news because there's so many questions with direction of NIL. There's questions with the House settlement that's coming down. There's a lot of changes, and so obviously there's systematic changes in the AD department kind of happening, and you can see things shuffling kind of quickly. So just 30,000 foot view on the news that came out today. Isaac, I'll just start with you and any high level thoughts.
First off, this is another L from Carolina to Michigan State. They took our president. They can't have our athletic director as well because that was all the hubbub a couple
Yeah.
weeks
Hmm.
ago was
Yeah, there's
that
some
Bubba
concern.
was gonna go. So I love that because I don't know how you guys feel about Bubba. I think he is a phenomenal athletic director. He
Hmm.
has guided things well. He, even though he's not a Carolina alum, he respects who Carolina is and how they try to do things. As other schools have cut non-rev sports, he has held steadfastly to Carolina's direction with that, and I love that because that's not just something like, to me, I talk about it like that's not just something Carolina does, it's DNA, having those 28 varsity sports. And
Hmm.
where else do you get to, I mean, Carolina just finished fourth in the Learfield Directors Cup standings, right? Like, it's crazy stuff. And so I love that, and I love that he continues to champion that. And I hope Newmark will as well. So I love Bubba sticking around. I love there being an intentional transition, not just a I'm out now. Who are we going to go get? I think that really helps with that. I love, like, somebody asked me earlier on Tuesday, like, from NASCAR, what is that all about? Does he know? And that's not what it's about to me. You said
Hmm.
30,000 foot view. 30,000 foot view is this is a dude who has been successful as the president of at one of the biggest entities in all of the American sports landscape, who is coming in. So it's another clear sign that Carolina is taking seriously the professionalization of collegiate athletics,
Hmm.
to get somebody of this stature in. And I think it makes a lot of sense. I think Bubba's going to be able to train him up on the finer intricacies of what it means to be an AD. And I think it's a very wise step, one that I would not have seen coming, but I'm all in on it, is my gut
Hmm.
reaction to it.
Yeah. Jay?
I feel the same way. This is Carolina being really proactive, and I think it's also a consistent thread that we've seen here. I was not on board with the Bill Belichick hire or how the process went down, but the fact that the infrastructure was built around a financial commitment, and then what that actually looked like in terms of structurally to football, and then from there you get the GM hire with basketball. Carolina is taking a business approach to athletics, which you have to do in a world where this is now professional athletics, the college version of it, right? So I think it's very proactive. I love the fact, like you said, Isaac, that Bubba is sticking around. his institutional knowledge, also his industry knowledge too, and his leadership. He's seen just about everything at this point, both at UNC and other places during the course of his career. So that person to be able to lean on as a new athletic director in a very rapidly shifting landscape is huge. And then Newmark, somebody who has the background as an attorney before his role currently in professional racing, he was working for a firm that worked with the SEC, worked with Conference USA. I joke that that gives him some background into Carolina's future conference home as well as NC State's future home in Conference USA when they get relegated. So jokes aside, though, that gives him he's almost like a unicorn in a way, right? And I felt this way about Tanner in terms of the legal background, understanding contracts, negotiation, the corporate sponsorship side of it. But he also has that experience with the bureaucracy and the litigious nature of the NCAA, but also college athletics. And that's where Bubba can really help him a lot too. Craig and I both worked at Carolina for multiple years, and it's a very political place, right? It's a very bureaucratic place. It's very unique as the flagship university in that way, and not from a like broader scale global or countrywide politics, nationwide politics, but like the relationships. And so you need somebody who understands the institution, understands how to navigate those relationships. So I think that part is hugely a testament to Bubba too. This is a service leadership type of move. He doesn't have to do this. It shows to me his commitment to UNC and to this place, like you said, Isaac, to kind of seeing the vision out. And he's somebody that has been a leader in this space. He's been constantly talking about doing media appearances, talking about the future of athletics and how they are attacking some of these things related to revenue and corporate sponsorships and things that have to happen that may not be popular. Even moving the Smith Center we've talked about. We don't need to dive into that now, but
does NASCAR know anything about corporate sponsorships? I don't.
Yeah, it made me think. It actually made me think about because I saw Ross Martin had posted from somebody else, I think on Twitter, a UNC future jersey with like 17 different sponsors on it. It made me think of Talladega Nights and Ricky Bobby with the Fig Newton sticker on his windshield, being like, "This is dangerous, but I do love the Fig Newtons." That's the first thing that came to mind for me. So it's gonna be a new world, and yeah, I mean NASCAR has been the leader of that, so they definitely understand it. But yeah, so Bubba, I mean, the last thing I'll just say on it to wrap it is I worked with athletics a little bit when I was at UNC, and it was at some events with Bubba, and you just see how genuine he is in terms of caring about the students and the people that he's working with. And so again, I think it's a very, in some ways, selfless. Like, yeah, he's going to get paid. It's a good role for him too, but it's a way for him to really see out and maybe not fully on his terms, but to some extent be able to continue and complete the vision and mission of getting Carolina to that next chapter of college athletics.
Guys, here's my one concern with Newmark. Um, I say this as the three of us sit here as bearded men. Yours are both fuller and darker and more glorious than mine.
Jonathan started growing this morning, actually.
Yeah, I shave every morning at 8 o'clock.
Today when he got a shower. Steve Newmark's a goatee guy,
yeah.
And I don't know that I can trust a goateer. That's the one area of concern for me is you got to go big or get rid of that thing altogether. I don't know.
Here's the good news. Yeah. Here's the good news, Isaac, is he's starting during the summer. So maybe he can get with Roy Williams.
There you go.
Summer okay. Roy with the beard, right? The bearded Roy Williams during the summer. I forgot about
that, yes.
So maybe he can get on that level as he transitions into the role. But I'm with you. I think the beard and maybe just the stress of the job, you just let the goatee go.
These are important red flags to bring up, all right? We're just trying to look out for the fans, look out for everybody.
That's right.
That's hilarious. Yeah, Newmark's going to be, goatee aside, I do think he has the experience in NASCAR. He is, worked on the charter system as well in NASCAR, which is in a way talking about revenue sharing and ensuring racers get certain amounts. I'm not going to deep dive into that because it's not my area of expertise. But point being, this is a business, as you said, Isaac, and Jay, as you know, that's what it is now. And Carolina is a little behind on how they were treating it as a business, saying the Carolina brand is just the Carolina brand. People want to come here, students want to play here, et cetera, et cetera. That was bought out by money, and now we're on board. And it seems like, to me, this is the first truly proactive step that I have seen. It's not a reactive general manager to other teams and what they're doing. It's a proactive step of bringing someone on who has that corporate brand experience and is familiar And as a Chapel Hill native, already passionate about Carolina basketball and all things Carolina. So I think a lot of it will come naturally to him. One of the quotes in the Go Heels article that I just want to read real quick here that struck and kind of stuck with me was he said, like many passionate Tar Heel fans, avidly following UNC athletics has represented a special and unique bond with my family and friends since childhood, and I recognize the role it serves for the university. I love that because that's how I feel about it just as a fan, right? Like this matters to a lot of people, and I think he'll take that passion plus that corporate experience and bring something good to Carolina. And we get to keep Bubba. I am a Bubba fan as well, so I echo that.
Yeah, as fellow Walmart Carolina fans, you and I, Craig, since we didn't graduate from UNC,
That's right.
I guess all three of us, right? So as fellow Walmarters, you can be passionate about your school and not have attended there.
That's
So
right.
that's a real thing that exists. But yeah, I feel really positive about it. I appreciate the time, Isaac, in terms of I know this news just broke and it's something
Yep.
that we'll be kind of parsing through and getting a sense of how it's what it's going to look like, and especially as we get into next summer, what the transition process actually looks like. But definitely not something I was expecting, but was pleasantly surprised, like you said, Craig, proactive in taking a lead in some things here. Now with a front office style approach to college basketball, but this hire I think is really setting up Carolina for a good situation. So,
Mhm.
but yeah, Isaac, again, thank you for being on with us. This was a lot of fun to chat,
Yeah.
just so many different topics and pick your brain about all the things Carolina basketball. You're such a wealth of knowledge there, and we appreciate you just taking the time to rap with us a little bit.
Oh man, been far too long in the making. So glad we're getting to do it. We need to flip flop it. I need to have you guys on Locked On Tar Heels sometime soon. We need to make that happen.
We'd be happy to. I'm sure we'll have a few more topics in, just a couple of days even to talk about.
That's right.
I didn't expect to have this many today, but Jonathan sent me that article for Bubba at 9 a.m. and here we are adding another thing to the list. So yeah, thank you for taking the time. I know, as we mentioned at the top of the show, the man's already doing 2 daily shows. So he's busy. You got your family, all that, but appreciate you taking the time and it was a joy to talk with you.
It's an absolute pleasure. I love the hard work you guys are doing. Thank you. Like you said earlier, love to be in this space all together. I know there's a lot of folks out there doing stuff for Carolina athletics, and I'm glad that the three of us are a big part of that.
It's good stuff. Thanks, Isaac.
Thank you guys.